Our webinar today is titled Ensuring Responsible Security Amidst Insecurity in Iraq. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce the three panelists that we have, all based in Iraq right now. So we have Drew Weir, Managing Director of IRNIS Iraq, which is a certified ICoCA member company. We have Laith Shana, who's Regional Security Director for Iraq and Levant with General Electric International. And finally, we have Hassan Wahab, who is with Iraqi Al-Amal Association, which is one of our civil society organization members of the International Code of Conduct Association. The situation in Iraq, as we know, has deteriorated really since kind of October of last year. And presents many different challenges for companies and organizations, including civil society organizations that are operating there. And I'd like the conversation really to begin with Hassan. Hassan, it'd be great if you could, first of all, let us know about the work of Iraqi Al-Amal, because many people online may not know the association. Mm-hmm. And provide us with your kind of assessment of what the security situation in Iraq is right now, especially from the perspective of a human rights organization like your own.
Thank you, Chris, very much. And hello, everybody. My name is Hassan. I'm managing human rights programs at the association. Iraqi Al-Amal Association is one of the biggest civil society organizations in Iraq. We've been established since 1992 after the Second Gulf War, with the aim to provide relief and assistance to the Iraqi people. But later on, in 2003, in May, Iraqi Al-Amal Association, after the U.S. operation, been opening their office in the main office in Baghdad. And it's been delivering all activities and been provided throughout all of Iraq. Now we are having 7 offices in Erbil, Nainawa, Tikrit, Kirkuk, Baghdad, Najaf, and Basra. We've been registered in the NGO Directorate, the Federal Directorate, and the KRG Directorate as well. And Iraqi Al-Amal Association been accredited the ICoSoc consultative status since 2018, and we are members of ICoCA. So I'm going to focus on the component of human rights, the programs of human rights, since I'm much more involved. The biggest human rights project launched by Iraqi Al-Amal Association since 2013. It's been funded by the EU. This project called Al-Nama Center for Human Rights. It's one of the biggest strategic projects managed by Iraqi Al-Amal Association. This program mostly dealing with reporting the cases of violations across Iraq. So we have representatives in all provinces of Iraq, and we are taking the complaints of human rights incidents. We also report to the on thematic basis and report human rights incidents to international community. So we are trying to match the international standards in terms of focusing on the delivering shadow reports on time to the international conventions committees in Geneva, and also to deliver statements, urgent appeals, and complaints to special procedures as well. As part of our work is focusing on the violations and what we can consider as complaints, receiving a complaints come through Iraqi people and through the public that considered against private security companies. We mostly, with our membership in ICoCA, trying to focus on the bill of private security companies to make sure that the human rights components in being applicable for all registered private security companies for those registered. As you may know, let me give you just a brief about the bill of private security, Iraqi bill for private security companies, number 52, year 2017. We've been in this bill. If you explore this bill, you will find 3 times the human rights being mentioned in this bill. In the chapter 4, the recruiting staff for private security companies, Article 14, paragraph 5, it's been clearly mentioned that all workers of private security companies must be aware about human rights before the recruitment. And also, it's the human rights being mentioned in chapter 7, the commitment of private security companies, Article 20, and paragraph 8, that the all private security companies must organize trainings to their staff and awareness, legal awareness about the essentials of human rights for their staff. Also the Article 23, paragraph 3, the focus on human rights against is to prevent any assaulting to human rights and any assaulting to freedom of expression. So mainly we are trying to focus with ICoCA to make sure on national basis that all private security companies are respecting human rights, and we are trying to facilitate for people a channel for receiving complaints from happened by private security companies in Iraq. So this is just a quick brief, and I'm happy to provide in-depth information maybe during the discussion. Thank you, Chris.
That's a great kind of introduction, especially to the kind of regulation of the industry.
Maybe I missed the part of security and the current issues, since we are shifting the focus actually on monitoring the current use of lethal force against protesters in Iraq, the high number of death protesters, a high number of abduction against Iraqi human rights defenders and activists, high number of injured people, and high number of people with disability due to their participation in the current ongoing demonstrations. So the focus of all civil society organizations, those who are working in the field of monitoring human rights, been shifted. And we can say there is a gap right now in focusing on the private security companies. So mostly all civil society organizations right now shift the attention into monitor and document incidents happened against Iraqi human rights defenders, activists, those who are considered as motivators for the current ongoing demonstrations, and what's happening to the peaceful demonstrators themselves.
Great, thank you. So Drew, can we turn to you next? Again, it would be really helpful if you can just give an overview of the company, how long you've been operating there in Iraq, how that environment has possibly changed or not during that time, and bring us up to the kind of current day and cover a little bit, if you can, what some of the challenges are presented there right now in terms of operating in Iraq as a responsible security company.
All right, good afternoon. Yeah, Drew Weir from Aranis. So Aranis Iraq itself was formed in 2003. So we've been in country now for pretty much since the offset. Myself personally, I was in Iraq 2004-05, again in 10-11, and now 19 and 20. So I've got a good overview of where we started and where we are. And I must admit, it's a 180 degrees from the beginning of the security situation, but also the private security companies' responses and training and ethos. From where originally we had the sort of Private Security Association of Iraq in 2004, which was set up initially to self-regulate and determine how each company would operate. And again, this was new operations, new SOPs to the private security companies. to the pretty much it was an immediate requirement to be regulators. No government would regulate us. So we went through self-regulation. And again, several PSCs signed up to this. Certainly from the British side, we were the first signatory of the British Association of Private Security Companies in 2006. This has then developed into the Montreux document in 2008, which was basically advising the states on how to deal with private security companies and the legal and regulatory and human rights issues that were coming out of Iraq. We all know there was been one or two from the past major instances where private security companies have not performed to the high standard that we all expect. This was then developed through to yourself, to ICoCA in 2010. And then we developed private security PSC1 in 2012, which is now developed into ISO 18788 in 2015, which so happens to coincide with the new Iraqi labor law of 2015, which came in then. So going from 2003-4 to where we are in 2020 has been a sort of incredible development on the regulatory, the legal side. But a key theme throughout all of this is human rights. The environment in 2003-4 was very much, obviously, US invasion against coalition, very aggressive, targeting international companies, targeting international PSCs. And that went all the way through from 2006, 7, 8, 9. Then it sort of became slightly quieter in 10, 11, up till 2014 when ISIS came in. And then we've had 3 more years of obviously very highly sort of offensive operations against coalition, but also against people in Iraq. The situation now, though, has again changed in the sense that there's a lot of public unrest. There's a lot of governmental inertia. We're aware of the situation over the Prime Minister's position. So in the recent sort of past 5 months, obviously the 1st of October, the public protest starting, resulting in the resignation of the Prime Minister, followed by the selection of a Prime Minister designate who's resigned on the 1st of February. And we now have 15 days to appoint another Prime Minister who's got 30 more days to select the cabinet. All of this instability has an effect on our operations because it affects all the commercial side, it affects the revenue, the public protests threaten to close down, say, the Marlow oil fields. And you have to remember that the people we employ, certainly in Aranis, where 90% plus of our employees are Iraqi. They come from those communities. They feel the sense of instability, the sense of unjust around. So it's a different environment from 2003-4. We don't feel right at the moment that we as PSCs are going to get attacked as such, but that could change if the unrest turns into more of a violent scenario. Primary big threat is there's obviously a very anti-US narrative going on from inside and from external, obviously the Iranian issue. And that is the key point at the moment is the anti-American. As a British company, I'm not getting the sense that there is that much anti-UK feeling. That could change again. But from our sort of client side, we established the Oil Protection Force in 2003 to 2005. And that was 16,500 employees. And Aranis has a very good relationship with a lot of the communities because of that initial contract, which was north and south, east and west of the whole of Iraq. Was certainly a great engagement from our side of life, and we certainly got a good reputation from that. We've provided security to the major international oil companies, the oil service companies, to construction companies, to diplomatic missions, and also communication companies. So, the threats, we are protecting it. Generally, we are protecting international staff in those companies, and that is our focus. We're very much defensive and not offensive. We provide protective services. And our aim is that, you know, obviously, say underneath all this, we have a regulatory, we are audited every year on ISO 18788, ISO 9001 and likes. We are ICoCA registered. And that is key to success for us, to be seen to be respecting human rights, to be respecting Iraqi labor law, to be respecting communities. And we have to be sensitive to the ever-changing environment that's going on. It is difficult to manage sometimes, but you know, we do seem to be able to engage with the international companies and with local communities and get that balance along the line. But tomorrow's another day. It could change drastically overnight. We've seen how the scenario here is very fluid, and we need to be prepared to meet. So I think that's the introduction from me, unless you'd like to carry on any other key issues, Chris.
We will get back to many, Drew, I have no doubt, but thank you so much for that introduction. Leif, I'd like to turn to you now. Obviously, we all know probably who General Electric are, but we don't necessarily know quite so well what General Electric's operations and interests are in Iraq and Levant, where you cover. So if you can first just give us an overview of you know, the company there, and particularly, of course, what that means in terms of security provision, what your requirements are as a company. And then really, can you talk about, you know, how do you go about ensuring that the companies that you contract to provide security are going to do it responsibly, and how can you be assured that your risk contracting those companies is minimized?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, for the opportunity. Just to give a quick overview, like you listed, from a GE perspective, we're probably one of the very few companies operating outside the southern region, or outside the oil area, let's say within Basra and the southern region. We have operations in multiple provinces within the country. We operate in Mosul, Salah ad-Din province, El Anbar, Kirkuk, Diyala, Baghdad, and also we extend through the southern region, Karbala, Najaf, Diwaniyah, Basra, Nasri, and also Samawa. So we have a pretty extensive base of operation for us, which makes it a little bit more difficult for us from a security perspective, more challenging, because as you might be aware, and also the attendees here on this webinar, that in Iraq, one size does not fit all. And you know, what might sound easy somewhere in a certain province, you know, it might be proven to be very challenging. And the multiple risks within the country change by province, sometimes even by city within the same province. You know, be it tourism risk, be it civil unrest, be it the risk of war, the commercial risks, you know, the contractual risks, etc. And I think Drew painted some good background on the entire situation now ongoing in the country. Now, we do not operate in Syria. I mean, since Syria is part of the Iraq and Levant region, the one I cover for the company, we do, however, operate in Lebanon and also in Jordan. But the main focus from, let's say, a risk perspective is Iraq, because Jordan is a low-risk country. And also Lebanon, it might be an elevated risk. However, it's different type of risks that we have in Iraq. If we come and talk about how we go about our, you know, security operations, we mainly focus on, you know, let's say we have static guards, we have mobile security, we have cargo security, etc. But one of the main common thing that combines all our security operations is the following. We do our best to ensure that the companies that work with GE are in line with the human rights, are in line with the fair employment practices, and are also in line with the GE internal policies, which focus heavily on human rights and also fair employment practice. And honestly, I mean, I think we have numerous companies. I would not be naming any companies, but we have, you know, a fair number of companies who have, I would say, you know, very strong internal policies that are in line with the overall human rights. Their fair employment practices are, to be considered some of the best, and they are in line with our own internal policies and the overall expectations from an international community and international standard. We also ensure that when we sign contracts with the companies, we list all these laws and regulations within our contracts to make sure that the companies we contract with, be it security vendors or be it EPCs or even with our customers, that the local labor law, the local regulations, and also our own practices are fully adhered to. And we do audit, we do, let's say, internal audit on ourselves, and also we do audits on our vendors, based on, let's say, scheduled timings. And also we do spot checks, et cetera, to ensure that whatever is agreed on in that contract is being followed. That number one from a contractual perspective, but most importantly, to ensure that people are being taken care of properly, and human rights, be it the company to their own employees, also, or be it the security personnel working for the security vendor towards other people working at a certain site. Because we know the interaction between, for example, a static guard, at a gate of a project that hosts 2,000 employees on a daily basis. It's very, very important that the static guard understands the concepts, and they do have proper training. There is a good investment in their training and understanding, and also on the recruitment perspective, to ensure, number one, reputation of the security vendor and also GE is always preserved. And number two, they have the capability to diffuse the difficult situations as operating in Iraq. It's unfortunate, but we see many of those on a daily basis. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks so much. So I'd like to just kind of go into a little bit more depth about why. I mean, okay, so obviously you want to kind of minimize risk, but there presumably are costs associated with going with, responsible providers. Training, these things cost money. So you've kind of taken a leadership position here with GE. We see many clients, and Drew, I'd like to get your kind of take on this, because I think the position that you're in, you have a good sense of what the market drivers are at the moment and previously. But why have you, really stepped up to the plate here and decided that this is a key issue for GE? And is it you, or does it go higher up the food chain at GE? How does it work?
So I can summarize the answer to this, with one sentence, because it's the right thing to do. But plain and simple. It's the right thing to do to take care of people. It's the right thing to do to treat people fairly. It's the right thing to do to make sure that people are properly trained, invested in from a career perspective, because obviously as companies, we have responsibilities to our employees. And, from GE perspective, this goes all the way, throughout the food chain of the company, from the chairman all the way down within the security function, the multiple functions we have in the company, also the multiple business leaders. It's very important for us to ensure, and I would like to emphasize on that word, ensure that, not only us as a company, but also any other companies and entities we do business with, they always do the right thing. Because, I've been with the company for 8 years now, and on every session, any discussion, not just personal, but also the messages we receive from the company leadership and the business leadership is there's only one way of doing things, and that is the right way. I hope that answers your question briefly.
Sure. Drew, can you kind of give us a sense of what the market drivers are here? Because is G representative of the market in Iraq? Are most clients like Laith requiring certain provisions within the kind of tenders that they put out for responsible providers? Give us a sense of what the market is at the moment.
So no, I very much applaud Laith in his initiative to upskill and improve the standards. There's several benefits that come out of this. From obviously we're looking to pay better for the locals. That goes back into the local community. They are upskilled. They get better treatment. But GE is certainly one of the few companies that actually will demand such a high level and say we welcome that. We wish every company did that. Some of it's because of costs, some of it's because their management don't understand the situation here. They know they have to have security, but actually it's a bit of a burden almost. Some of us see as just taxi drivers, basically from site to the airport. And they don't understand the major issues that, yes, higher quality employees, better trained, better regulated. This is all good for them. So no, GE certainly seems to be leading on this, and I say very much welcome it. But not every company do that. There is quite a spread. If you go through the compliance sheets, as we do for every contract, what does a client require? It can come through different standard of vehicles, different standards of training. Some of them don't ask us to prove that we pay social security. Some of them don't ask for timesheets. They don't actually really care. As long as they get from the airport back to the site, that's it. So no, there is a big variable out there, and it's some of it's where the companies come from, their international standards. They're working in Iraq. They don't have the same as, I say, a British company or an American company. So there is a variance there, and it's quite difficult to manage. On the flip side, though, there was a big drive to reduce prices. We will not take a contract where we can't deliver the high standard because there is a cost to that. I prefer to say no to potential clients than to actually service their needs, because I'm looking at them. I'm doing my due diligence on the clients as well. And if they're not demonstrating the same high standard of human rights, why would I be associated with them best as possible? Or if I do, we make sure that we are absolutely regulated and we've been audited. Some clients I would actually turn down because of their treatment or their human rights records or their lack of concern. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, you are Drew. And you are Laith. You're ambassadors of ensuring high standards, and security companies. We can here play a role ultimately in kind of educating clients about these issues. Hassan, I'd like to get a sense from you of perhaps what the role of civil society organizations may be here, whether that's interacting directly with clients to raise awareness about these issues, or whether it's through kind of government regulation. Do you have a kind of an opinion on this?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Actually, we've been cooperating with the Directorate of Private Security Companies at the Ministry of Interior, but we find so many challenges. One of these challenges that the Directorate itself, there is a need for trainings and capacity buildings that we as civil society organizations with limited resources and funding, it's hard to match the needs of the Ministry of Interior. In the law, in the Bill of Private Security Companies, there is obligations to train the staff on human rights, while we've been looking forward to find and to track the Ministry of Interior procedure to monitor and to follow up on the private security companies, the human rights component. There is no follow-up. They are not giving a high priority to the human rights, while they are taking care of other conditions in the registration, for example. So the still human rights as a label not considered as a priority, and with the lack of funding for this for this issue, like the issue of private security companies from biggest donors, as we are working with so many donors in Iraq, the issue of private security companies not being raised on international or national level. So many funders determine their own policies for funding, and as we are civil society organizations, we cannot work without having fund, and then we mostly depend on the other, like human rights, but there's no focus on the private security companies. So the focus is really, there's a really lack by international donor to make much more effort on monitoring the human rights in the private security companies. And we need also to create a network and to expand the membership, members of civil society organization to join ICoCA, to create a kind of coalitions of civil society organizations in order to aware people to report incidents as well. And we are trying to take serious steps to advocate and lobby for activating a complaint system, but there is still a lack of awareness by people and by security companies as well. We've been doing visits to private security companies who are not registered for ICoCA, and they are not aware about the importance of having code of conduct, to the importance of getting involved with the ICoCA system, and even the government themselves. So the core problem right now, as we've been discussing with ICoCA and with the members of private security companies, is to convince the Iraqi government to join ICoCA as members, and the effort should be increased on lobbying on the government, and to have serious steps by the Minister of Interior to cooperate with them. I think this is the key point, to get all private security companies encouraged to join ICoCA and to respect human rights and the freedoms in the society. So the key point is working with the government and to also coordinate with other civil society organizations, since we are only 2 members, by the way. So for the information of the audience, we are only 2 members from civil society, representing Iraq civil society in Iraq, joining ICoCA. So, still we need to speak out. We need to make our efforts become much more louder and stronger if we just, increase the membership, members joining ICoCA.
Thank you. And I want to turn to allow time for questions now. We are getting some questions in. I'm not going to necessarily take them in order, but please do, if you've got questions, submit it in the Q&A as quick as you can. Hopefully we will get to yours. I'm actually going to take the last first because it kind of relates to what you've just been talking about, Hassan. So this is from Tony Chatin, question for Leif, but equally it could be, to all of you. But Leif, how do you recommend ICoCA inform clients of private security companies to the benefits you and GE obviously already recognize and demand? And Tony reflects that, ICoCA itself has been trying for 3+ years to achieve this. Progress is somewhat slow. I will say that, we've now got 9 security companies that have joined the association from Iraq. It's probably one of the largest kind of regional centers where we have companies, so it's growing. But we wanted to, grow quickly, and it's not, the growth has to be the right growth. It's not just members joining. We obviously need to make sure that they are kind of raising standards and that requirement is being kept. But how should ICoCA be focusing its messaging?
Great. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Chris. Now, one important thing is, if I may share a small slide, just a quick slide with everyone here. One of the major issues we found, gaps within the entire industry in Iraq, except for some of the ICoCA certified companies who are already, following the best in industry, fair employment practice, human rights. is actually the employment gaps, right? So, I mean, as a client, I've noticed many companies who are actually operating with major international clients. They don't even issue their employees with contracts. This is the simplest thing, the simplest requirement that any working individual should have an employment contract. Payment slips, some people would think might be a little bit fancy in a country, in an environment like Iraq, but also this is something that easily can be done. Every employee of every security vendor, not just security vendors, but every company operating anywhere, they have the right to receive a pay slip explaining what is the basic salary, what are the allowances, what are the deductions. Social Security is a major challenge, unfortunately, and we've been heavily trying to audit all our vendors to make sure they always deliver 100% on this one. Many security vendors in Iraq, they don't even register their employees for Social Security. And then if they have, let's say, a project for 2 years, the employee who does not have a contract, does not have a Social Security, I mean, number one, is not fair from a fair employment practice, but also it's against human rights. I mean, someone working, very hard for 2 years in a project, they should have at least a Social Security contribution made, to the Social Security Authority. And the most important is actually illegal not to register employees or not to have them enrolled in Social Security. It's a government regulation and it's required by the law. A major gap, honestly, is working hours. I mean, I've seen some people, they work from a task to task. They've been sent to Basra to collect something from Baghdad. They come back to Baghdad, they spend few hours, and then they're sent to Kirkuk. And I mean, I don't have the exact statistics, to be honest, but I know for a fact they're having many issues, not security related, but for example, road traffic accidents, because a driver has been driving for the past 10 hours with no rest. Payment timings, again, it's similar to payment slips issues. It's not very urgent, but also it should be there. People don't get paid on time. They don't get paid by the end of the month. I mean, the Iraqi law have allowed companies to pay their employees up until 5 days after the end of the month. So I can still, today is the 3rd, I can still get paid by 5th of March, and GE will be compliant with the labor law. However, the unfortunate and very sad fact, I would say, many companies, not just security, but many companies in Iraq, unfortunately, they always withheld a salary of a month or a month and a half, and they pay, their employees like literally half of the month on the 15th or sometimes on the 20th, depending on their cash flow issues. So these are the main gaps that we have noticed from employment. Now, here's a question. Tell me any international company or any, company that has a proper code of conduct would allow all these things to happen. I would say none. And this is exactly the point that I believe ICoCA should highlight. I should highlight, Hassan should highlight, Drew should highlight, and everybody else should highlight. For those, I would say, clients who either, to Drew's point, they don't have the comprehension, but unfortunately, and I'm responsible for this statement, I feel some of the clients, they actually decided to look the other way. It's not just ignorance. They know this is happening. They know the culture. They've been operating here for many years. But the unfortunate fact remains that they decided to do nothing. Over to you.
So, I guess one question is, should they be the types of clients that ICoCA and our members are trying to reach out to, or is there another group, a group more likely to take the lead, the G, and now we're slowly seeing others taking as well, requiring these standards?
Would you please say that again, Chris?
Well, there are clients that maybe just aren't gonna, they're not going to do this. They're not going to require high standards. Maybe it's because, the top management just don't think this is a priority issue. So I guess the question is, how does ICoCA, so this is one of the messages that we need to get across, that these things need to be in place. But how do we target the right companies, the right organizations? It's not just companies. there are humanitarian organizations that are clients of security companies as well as governments. I don't necessarily, I don't know if any of you got the answer, but it's a question out there, how we target the companies that are going to be responsive, they're going to engage with this issue and want to do the right thing, as you say.
I mean, like I said, I cannot decide to your point. There is no one way of doing it. But I would say, I mean, you guys can put more awareness out there on, what ICoCA is all about. From a human rights perspective, you can also look into the gaps that, I shared some of, and I would be more than happy to share more details later on, separately. I'm pretty sure Drew, Hassan, they can add more comments from their side. And then you come up, let's say, with companies, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a company choice whether to do the right thing or not. That's something not ICoCA, not even any government can enforce. But we're talking about multinational companies in Iraq. We're talking about international companies with offices almost everywhere. And you cannot just hide the fact that, you're not doing the right thing. You cannot. I mean, at certain points, let's be honest, it will have some reputational implications. All it takes is a small incident and a small project. And then if an investigation happens, everyone will know why that incident happened. And let's talk about reputational implication on a company's share price, for example. If something that they decided, I'm not supposed to worry about why the guard did not get paid on time, or why a driver has been working for 16 hours and he fell asleep or literally fainted in that armored vehicle, which is about, I would say, probably 2 or 3 tons, and hit a T-wall, getting one of their clients killed in the backseat.
Question from Graham Small. Do any of the panel see a move by the Iraqi government in the future to influence international companies to hire Iraqi-only companies?
I think certainly this has been an issue over the past couple of years as the local private security companies have emerged. But certainly, a few years ago, I believe that the international companies pushed back against the government, saying they aren't at the right standards. We don't want our expats being protected by the new naissance of local security companies. Now, the situation is changing. I've seen some local security companies who are actually very good. They are raising their standards, but there's still some that are, will there be a case where no international private security companies are in Iraq? I don't know. You'd like to think that standards would rise altogether, but I think that having international PSCs, because our main role is to protect international clients. And I can see that we need that sort of, that capability in the country. But will the Iraqi government determine one day no international PSCs? It could happen. You just don't know.
Great, thank you.
Chris, if I may, just a quick note.
Yeah.
On a personal level, being an Iraqi citizen myself, I've been within this industry for more than 15 years, mainly in Iraq and the region. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, to Drew's point, there might be a lot of influence happening. There might be political drivers into this topic because it's a very sensitive topic. But I don't see as a country, as a community, and also as an industry in Iraq, the local Iraqi companies are far from being ready to have all locally based companies to run this, I would say, rather sensitive industry in Iraq. We need many, many years, I would say at least 7 to 10 years, if the authorities and the regulators of this industry within the government and country are willing to go that way. I mean, they will need at least 7 to 10 years to ensure they bring up the standard up to what might be accepted by the international or multinational companies operating in Iraq.
And we also have to remember that of the local PSCs, there's a registration issue. Actually, a lot of the local PSCs have international staff inside them. So when you're looking at it as an international PSC or a local PSC, actually the capability is quite often the same, because there's people come from Aranis, or should we say, and have gone into the local PSCs. There's I don't know how many local PSCs have no expats, but I imagine it's not that many.
And we are seeing, from our point of view, more kind of local companies starting to approach ICoCA, interested in what the association is about, interested in how they can get involved and start to raise their standards too. There has been a recent move, for people that aren't necessarily aware. The membership of ICoCA recently voted to create a new category of company, which are called affiliates. Affiliates of ICoCA are not full member companies, but they are companies that agree to be monitored. They agree to be compliant with the code, have a critical level of standards in place to become affiliates. They're not necessarily yet on that journey to certification. And we'll see, it's early days. This has just happened in January, this new category created, but we suspect we may see more companies approaching us that aren't yet comfortable with the idea of standards and that they're yet there, but are nevertheless wanting to raise their standards. So watch that space. I want to move to another question for either Drew or Leith. What happens if a company, subcontractor, or even an individual violates the policies or regulations? For example, contracts cancelled, possibilities of prosecutions, and how transparent are such sanctions?
Yeah, from our side, I mean, we don't call them sanctions. So number one, we allow subcontracting. However, it has to be approved in writing previously by GE. We've had this issue before, to be honest. Some companies would get a contract and then they would go and subcontract everything to another company. I mean, from just from a cost perspective, cost effectiveness, why would I want to contract company A while company B will be doing all the work, and then company A just get, let's say, a finder fee or a mediary fee? So we kind of killed that practice. However, sometimes for operational needs, some companies in certain locations, they require the assistance of another security company. So we allow subcontracting based on project needs, but however, it has to be done, it has to be approved in writing previously by the GE counterparts on that project. From a, let's say, quality assurance perspective, we make sure that we are very transparent with our vendors. There are no hidden language, let's say, in any of the contracts. And, both the rights of GE and also the contractors are fully preserved. Now I'm trying to move away from the traditional, let's say, verbal agreements on, hey, we will do this 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's a program we just started this year now. We're moving into the digitized KPIs, for example, for the security. So we will have a fully digital system for the KPIs for each and every of our projects and vendors that we have contracts with to ensure that it's even more transparent.
A question from Nora Leitzman. How are your companies responding to the Kataib Hezbollah threat of security companies working with US forces? And do you see UK companies as being visibly different in this regard? And how are you communicating with national staff on this issue and addressing their concerns? This is a very, regional question.
It is, and as Leith mentioned before, different promises, different problems. The scenario down in Basra is totally different to the scenario up in Mosul, Kirkuk, or Baghdad. And I mentioned prior, there is very much an anti-US narrative going on. And obviously after 3rd of January, when General Soleimani was killed in Bayat, all Americans were essentially evacuated. The majority of Americans were evacuated. Where I said beforehand, I don't feel that the UK companies are under threat at the moment, is we move through these provinces. We have local staff in the vehicle. So they know what's going on the ground. And yes, talking to other companies, obviously private security was pretty closely connected. There were instances where their vehicles were stopped at illegal checkpoints and they were asked to produce all their passports. They were looking for Americans. And the message came back, you British, you're fine. So we don't have any American contracts, so that's not a, should we say, an issue directly to us at the moment. But the feedback from the ground is that they're not targeting UK companies. We are not seen to be part of the same problem at the moment. The local staff are very aware of this. They seem happy, certainly from the sort of Ernest's point of view as a UK company. They're quite confident that we are not being targeted, and they are not being targeted either. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here, and Laith, you've kind of mentioned some areas, and I wondered whether there's any more we want to pull out. In addition to workplace rights issues, what have Laith and Drew found in their human rights risk assessments to be the most salient human rights risks that their companies face? With the changing and unstable political climate in Iraq, are there any pressing human rights issues that are not yet adequately addressed by the ICoCA code? And Hassan, you may have some opinions on that also.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I mean, one I would say underlaid or hidden problem is actually discrimination, unfortunately. I mean, we know discrimination happens all over the world. In Iraq also it does exist. However, it's more, it's a little bit different than, you know, I would say, you know, the general discrimination that we have. In Iraq, it's more sectarian, if I may. I mean, yes, we do unfortunately have discrimination against women. It's existing in our community, in our culture, and you know, Hassan and many others are fighting furiously against that. But the more worrisome is actually the discrimination based on sectarian backgrounds. For example, if you go to a certain province, you would have discrimination within that province itself between the multiple cities. This is not specifically addressed in the ICoCA because it's a very, let's say, geography-specific matter. But I think, you know, companies, clients, vendors, subcontractors, I mean, all the companies together can work to ease that issue. For example, I mean, we work with our vendors. We already ask people to be hired from the local communities, like Drew mentioned. That's the right approach to do, so, you know, give back to the local communities, especially when you have a large disrupting project in an area for 2 years. So it's only fair to make sure that, you know, people living within the project area also benefit from that project being within their areas by providing jobs. But we need to be mindful of the fact that you don't necessarily will be able to see all the talent you need within that area. I mean, based on the multiple requirements. So we do our best to normalize that issue, make sure everyone gets a fair chance to be employed, because Iraq is very is a heavy mixture, and you would see multiple sects, multiple backgrounds, multiple tribesmen within a specific area, and that's where I believe we should do our proper, I would say, community due diligence to ensure that everyone is being treated fairly when it comes to providing jobs, etc.
Yes, Chris. I think I'm totally agree with what Laith was saying. We had allegations of gender discriminations, but in private security companies, but this is something common in Iraqi community. So this is not something new. We have the discriminations even in the governmental institutions. So this is not something you know, new for the private security companies, but we couldn't consider and address those cases and issues due to limited resources and facts from private security companies in our reports. So maybe we had the opportunity to address this issue on higher level during the presentation of CDAW committee and reporting to the CDAW, the shadow reports, the recent one we've been done, but we couldn't actually had statements or maybe had witnesses from private security companies. We still have allegations about sexual exploitation and abuse, many issues, but not you know, reliable facts. So we know in order to report, we need to have statements, the victims, interviews with the victims. So there is a certain process and steps must be taken, and it's a big challenge, you know, to reach those victims in private security companies from women. And there is a lack of a complaint system in the majority of PSEs, and this is something we need also to develop further, to work on it, maybe with ICoCA, to develop a referral system to make linkages between us as private security, as civil society organization.
Yeah, and I mean, just to echo that, I think I agree with all those sentiments. The complaints mechanism is very important for everybody involved. It's something that we do have a complaints function, but a lot of improvements can be made. There are major challenges, as you say. Drew, I'm going to give the last word to you because we're actually at time, but you were going to say something.
I was just going to say one of the risks that we private security companies have to manage is that often when we go out recruiting, we are actually from the councils. We have employees nominated to us because they come from the tribe, certainly more in the south. And when you look at discrimination, yeah, they are sort of saying to tribal leaders, you need to employ this person, you need to employ that person, you need to employ that person. That to us is a risk because we're being told to who we have to employ. And the reason we have to do checks and balances is we don't have to employ them if they're totally incapable, but we have to put them through all the training. Now, some of the times, as I say, it's not us discriminating. We need to be very fair about it. But you have to manage that scenario. And as I say, certainly more in the south, but it is a risk we manage from there.
Well, we are at time. I want to thank all our panelists and everybody who's attended online. There's a whole bunch of questions we just unfortunately haven't had time to get to, but that just shows you, I think, how engaged people are on this topic. We are looking forward to continuing to engage intensively in Iraq and the region. It's one of the priority areas for ICoCA. And so lots of work to do for everyone involved. But thank you for today and look forward to seeing you on the next event. Bye-bye for now.